AI-generated content. One of the less controversial and dramatic topics on YouTube, no doubt. As Meta plans to bring generative AI to metaverse games. Now, I could not care less about the metaverse. I view it's, well, I mean, this is the promotional shot right here where the dudes are stuck in the ground. No, the metaverse is not only dead on arrival, it is buried on arrival. But the idea of AI-generated content in video games is one that really deeply appeals to me, and this tool will eventually probably end up as the near sole purview of massive corporations who will sit upon it like greedy little harpies, but I'm not yet completely black-pilled on the subject, as I do still believe that AI could be an enormously democratizing force in entertainment. And hey, even if AI-generated video game content would come out absolutely ass 90% of the time, well, how does that make it any different from the current year gaming industry? Anyhow, Meta plans to bring more generative AI tech into games, specifically VR, AR, and mixed reality games, as the company looks to reinvigorate its flagging metaverse strategy. Flagging is a very kind way of putting it. In fact, VR and AR in general are flagging pretty badly, in large part due to the fact that, well, you can't play enough goddamn games on the system. It's like purchasing a console and it only having 7 games available to it. According to a job listing, Meta is seeking to research and prototype new consumer experiences with the new types of gameplay driven by generative AI, like games that change every time you play them and follow non-deterministic paths. In parallel, the company aims to build or partner with third-party creators and vendors to use generative AI-powered tools that could improve workflow and time to market for games. So, this is where it actually gets rather interesting, because one of the big issues with games today is that they have ever-ballooning budgets. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and thus necessarily they need to sell millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of copies to even break even. And bearing in mind here as well, it is not enough for a game to break even. That is the same with movies, right? If a movie merely earns back its money, well, where's the money to finance the next one going to come from then? Because ideally, you want a movie to be such a hit that it will actually finance the next movie, so that you can keep pushing the profits onwards, and also to build yourself a safety net, of course, for that inevitable bomb you will eventually experience. This is why a Disney movie can earn like $100 million and still be considered largely a flop, because it hasn't actually paid for the continued process of making movies. And if, of course, you make one movie, but you don't have enough to make the second one, your company's dead. Unless you find investors, or unless you can cannibalize some other part of the company, as Disney is currently doing. And having AI tools, because a lot of this work is frankly relatively simplistic. We can demonstrate this by the fact that we've already transitioned over onto everybody using the same engines. Back in the day, everyone made their own game engine. Total War had its own game engine, Bethesda had its own game engine, etc, etc. And every game basically needed to make its own little engine to run in. But then eventually people decided, hey, why don't I lease out my engine? And now we have a handful of major engines that does most of the tedious work for you, then leaving you to concentrate on the actual making the game part. Well, there are several parts of video game creation that probably could be automated to a greater or lesser degree. Stuff like basic texture working, for example. You need to find a way to wrap up the model in its actual textures. Okay, that is probably something that could be automated. The creation of generalistic assets. If you have a series of 3D models and you need a tank, but you need to make that tank a little bit different from all of the other tanks, say you're making a World War II game and you want a Sherman tank. Okay, you've already got a Sherman, but you need it to look a little bit different. You need a little bit different mud splatters on it, you know, a little bit of different scorch hits from impacts that didn't penetrate, stuff like that, scarring, right? Okay, you could have an artist do that by hand, or the AI could probably do it for you. Hell, art in general is something that will probably be more or less automated eventually. They aren't kidding when they say that artists need to learn to prompt, because Yeah, in all due likelihood, the top 1% of artists will always have jobs, of course, but the majority of artists, those that are merely capable of providing, midline illustrations, well, the AI can probably do that quicker and cheaper, and there's the key word, cheaper. See, you can argue very easily so that AI will remove a lot of the soul of video game making, but I'm actually going to make the counter-argument. Back in the day when we had some of the best and most soulful games we ever seen, titles like Sacrifice for example, well, they were made by far smaller teams of far more passionate individuals. When you need to make a game with 300 people, the original driving passion of the 2 or 3 guys who came up with the idea is inevitably going to be diluted across dozens of corporate groups, of meetings, about meetings with managers, meetings with artists, meeting with art leads, blah 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 blah. If you could create a situation where those 2 people could actually create their game by themselves, well, I actually think, if anything, the soul might be purer for it. As again, AI is a tool. It is not intended to simply replace the video game creators, it is intended, preferably, to enhance them. So, they do go on to a little bit more depths here as well, but most of it's basically talking about, again, the idea of having automatically generated content or making it easier, like giving small teams horsepower for large studios, and accelerating innovation across the board. Yes, because if you come up with a new mechanic, one guy can't make that into a game, but with AI, you might just be able to at the very least make a relatively rough working prototype to show off to people and then maybe get funding for a full game. But actual generative content, there's a really interesting part in which I believe, again, the future of gaming probably does lie. See, I have long been a proponent for the idea of AI companions, because we've done every game by now, pretty much. We have fought every dragon, we have defeated every alien invasion, etc, etc, etc. So what would actually be excellent is if you could have some sort of actual living world, and I don't mean the idea of radiant AI where the painter gets up at 6 to continue his goddamn piece that never finishes, but imagine a world where your companions are AI. They will respond to situations fluidly and reactionary depending upon what's going on. You could be playing Grand Theft Auto, for example, and there's an AI director in the game as well that decides, okay, what's going on today? Well, the player's in a police car, so clearly he's interested in doing some police quests. Okay, I'm gonna make a bank robbery over here, and I'm gonna contact the player on the radio. Right, I'm going to then AI generate a briefing for that, like there is a bank on Manhattan Street, you gotta go over there, but before you do, the robbers are heavily armed, please visit the police station and pick up like a special weapon, for example. Okay, relatively simplistic. You've only got a couple of things there. You create a bank robbery, you create a modifier, heavily armed, and then you add in a bonus item like a weapon or something. Alright, you could probably do something like that. Now, again, I'm of course throwing shit out the window there that any programmer is going to be shaking his head at. But after playing around with things like chatbot AIs, for example, for the... what video was that? I don't even remember now. I was doing research on this for some reason, but AI already has a remarkable ability to improvise on the fly. The only real issue with this is trying to figure out how to make this interact with a video game. There's the difficult part, as you need to be able to give the AI the ability to actually create things in the game on the fly. Now, this is where it does get very, very complex, especially if you even wanted to create something truly original in the game. I mean, we are, of course, decades away probably from the AI being able to generate like new models, for example, or new characters and so on, but even something like just drawing upon a database of events that can be played, well, we've already had that for a while. The AI director in many PvE games, for example, is a super simplistic variant of this, where it checks the character's health, for example, and goes, okay, everyone's a bit low, I'm gonna put some health packs in the next, like, restroom spawning location. Or alternatively, everyone's doing really well, I'm gonna spawn a few more monsters to keep it challenging. Stuff like this. And if and it is a big if, mind you, we manage to create a functional system around this, where the AI is actually able to create a truly reactive world, either via having a large enough quantity of pre-created scripts that it can draw upon in reaction to your actions, or by allowing the AI to actually write its own scripts, which could lead to disasters. I'm not arguing the opposite. It could make some really, really terrible things, but on the other hand, perhaps that's part of the fun and games as well. And see, Skyrim's an excellent example of this, right? When you first go up to a giant and it smacks you and it sends you into orbit, people didn't go like, oh gosh, game-breaking bug, I hate Skyrim. People went, that was funny. If you've got a good game, as the Bethesda Elder Scrolls series can demonstrate, bugs can actually add to the charm in the weirdest way. And if you do it correctly, AI bugs could do something along the same lines. Again, I'm being overly optimistic here, but the idea of generative AI is really appealing to me. The idea of having, a dungeon delver game. To go back to something a little bit more simplistic, right? Say you've got a roguelite, where you have so and so many paths towards the end. Imagine having an AI opponent that actually grows alongside you, figures out new traps or new ways to try and prevent the hero from reaching his end objective. That could provide an interesting challenge. Or even having a radiant boss, sort of, in a video game that looks at your things. Like, imagine the classic open-world Ubisoft game, right? You take over a village and turn it into the La Resistance, or whatever nonsense is currently going on, and the AI goes, oh, one of my nodes has been flipped. I clearly need to launch an attack on that node. Then that attack fails because the player's right there to murder it, and the AI goes, okay, that didn't work. What next? Okay, I'm gonna fortify the next node in line then. And you kind of move into a bit of a reactive game of chess with the AI. Again, this is all rather optimistic and hopeful, but the potential of AI in games is damn near infinite. And again, the ability for even an individual, I'm saying again a lot here, aren't I? But lots of qualifiers to be added in here, okay? The potential for an individual to, in his living room, create his own set of entertainment via an AI. Imagine if anybody could make their own variant of The Lord of the Rings, for example, using a hyper-sophisticated AI to create all of the CGI and the model and the shots required. You could, ideally speaking, have 10,000 different versions of The Lord of the Rings, ranked by some sort of system, and everybody could watch the version they preferred. As that really should be the end goal, to democratize entertainment to the point where everybody is getting their preferred entertainment, where the wokest crazies, at that point reduced to about 0.1% of the population, can sit there watching Harley Quinn, while the rest of us enjoy Batman the Animated Series. It's an optimistic view of the future in a not particularly optimistic situation, as, well, Meta is of course being developed by one of the, biggest corporations on the planet, etc. Yes. Its potential for democratization is going to be severely limited by the companies that have the financial capabilities to actually create it, but I am still, at least for the moment, optimistic. Anywho, a random rant about the potential beneficial future of video games out of the way. I have been Arch, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon with other more optimistic things, rare as they may be. Have a good day.